Zolgensma was approved recently, which is a landmark approval in cell and gene therapy. And one thing to note is that it actually is the start of a huge pipeline of additional ambitious and transformative therapies in the works. So according to ARM, there's about 1,000 cell and gene therapy trials ongoing right now. And last year, there was about $13 billion invested in this particular space in cell and gene therapy. So there's a lot of money, a lot of products in development, which means there's choice both for investors as well as for companies. And it's important to differentiate.
It's the overlap between running a 10-year venture fund where you've got to invest your money and harvest it and hopefully close the fund after a decade. Laying that on top of the sort of science that's coming to bear in this under this broad umbrella we refer to as cell and gene therapy, which is a phenomenon that typically takes a generation, a biotech generation, to mature to the point where it's routine. So if you think about monoclonal antibodies in their day, those are pretty routine now, but they weren't always routine. And so whether you're talking CAR T therapy or true gene therapy, these things are rewriting the entire script for the industry from soup to nuts. In some respects, they are true individualized therapies. And right through the manufacturing process, the regulatory framework, ultimately distribution and pricing, they require a rescripting of the entire industry scenario. And that's in process.
The biggest hurdle, as Peter alluded to, is the manufacturing. How can you consistently and efficiently produce this medication? And if we look at right now, it's not for the lack of proposal. We get tons of proposal in this space. We just haven't been able to catch up on the evaluation. But if we look at the proposal, if you addressing a problem that's there's the unmet medical need is not obvious, and you don't have any new angle addressing the manufacturing, the technical side of the problem, this probably is not a good project to look into. But you have to have something like new angle. I do think the technical side also worth looking to investing. Eventually, how if we can bring down this $2 million drug to even 1 million of 500,000, that would be a great breakthrough, in my opinion.
I think the regulatory part of this is really important because it's different, and there are only so many people out there who really know this from an FDA perspective, who have been on the inside and understand what they're thinking, and they are completely overwhelmed at the FDA because it's the result of the successes and some of the policies which have been enlightened. But now there's however many trials, and it's just incredible how busy they are. So they really want to work with people that understand that and understand the pressures that are there under, and only come to them when they absolutely need to. But they're very willing and open to the interchange. But if you bother them unnecessarily, you won't get the help when you need it. And so for a company and for investments that we look at, it's really important that you have the stature, the chops, the understanding to attract those few people that exist in the world of regulatory consulting that are trusted by the FDA.
You mentioned one thing about the Canavan disease. Do you think the subsidiary structure allows you to more readily support these rare diseases? Because if you have a single asset like that in a company, it's going to be really hard to make the math work out. So in your particular model, how does that fit in
Right, yeah, so as you said, I think this is where really having the kind of the BridgeBot platform really plays out here because of the Adrena's program where this is like for a pretty prevalent disease, we are already thinking about what is the best way to do manufacturing, and then we already have the kind of regulatory consultant in place. Completely agree, this is like a super important place in here, and then also having people who know how to do the IND enabling studies and then really pushing things to the clinic. And because those people and then our facility are already in place, it made us a lot easier to argue for a relatively rare disease and then bringing that to our portfolio. And it was also helpful that actually University of Florida, they actually did a compassionate use case study using one of their vector in the Kenevan patient, and then basically showing that in one of the infant injecting with a gene therapy, they showed tremendous improvement and then completely defied what the natural history study has been showing. And that definitely was very helpful for us to know, like, well, even though this vector has not been optimized, but it was already tested in human and then showed that it was extremely promising. That definitely helped us to kind of like pushing that forward and then think that this will be a therapy that we can make a difference.
There are usually two ways things start for us. One is we've identified a problem, one way or another, and then we go out and look for ways to solve that, and that's usually the best science and the best people. When I say people, usually it's the scientific expertise around the world. Who's best published, read publications, as you said. The other way is we have a really hotshot scientist that comes to us from academia and tells us the problems they're working on, and then we look into it from that angle. But it's always the problem and the people, scientifically, as well, and the science. That's first, before you do anything else. And then if you get through that, then it's like, okay, manufacturing, that's more of a detail. Obviously, it's a critically important detail, but it's a detail. And reimbursement even less so because we don't know. Who knows? So if it's an unsolved problem that gene therapy, for example, could solve, and there's the best team in the world working on it that's got it to a point scientifically that it looks viable, okay, we're going to assume if you're successful, it will be paid for one way or another. And that's the extent of our reimbursement analysis usually in these things.
And I would probably differentiate a little bit between clinical success, clinically promising, and commercially promising at this particular stage. So if we look at our portfolio, in the clinical stage, the ones that are the most advanced right now are going to be gene-modified HSC therapies for immunodeficiencies and hemoglobinopathies. Are these going to be commercially successful? It's not really clear because the patient population is so small for most of these, right? So it's unclear, but that's really where you see the biggest clinical success right now in terms of cell and gene therapies is you get these gene-modified HSCs, you can ex vivo gene-modify them, create space in the bone marrow, put them back in, and you can cure that disease and get a quick readout from these trials as well in their phase 1 and 2 stages. So in that respect, there's a good clinical promise from these particular therapies. What's going to be commercially promising could be something totally different. When you talk about in vivo versus ex vivo, really there's only going to be a certain subset of cells that you could do ex vivo, and in vivo is going to be more likely for those systemic diseases, and how you're going to address the challenges there is going to be critical. But I would say that right now, really clinical success is coming from gene-modified HSCs.